We have another big daddy here that's ready for a repot. He's beginning to try and escape the pot, and we can see all these old fern stalks. We know in winter now these would have died back, so they're going to come sprouting back as spring comes around. So we definitely need to get this done. Also, if we look into the pot, we can notice how deep it's sunk into the pot. And this side, it looks like all they've gone and done is top the pot up with bark. So now it's covered up all those rhizomes, and we know that's only going to cause troubles. So let's get straight to it. Bulbs in the center, a lot of them have lost their leaves already. So the bottom of this pot is all probably gooey, and we need to get this out. Welcome to the Nature Company. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below and that notification bell to be notified of all our upcoming videos so you don't miss out on a thing. Okay, so we're just going to have a look around the pot a bit. We can see all this new root growth that started to adhere itself onto the pot itself. We've got some nice new roots developing as the spring is just around the corner and it's getting ready to really start growing. These are quite vigorous growers, so they'll put on a lot of growth in spring and start hardening and maturing their canes off in the summertime so that they can get those flowers. We can see this new growth here, and it's even got spathes already starting to set in the center here. But as long as we're taking these off in large pieces and don't have to separate it too much, I shouldn't see why these flowers won't mature. So as long as we get it done now. A poor weak new growth here happening because it's trying to climb up through the base there. Here's another new growth starting up. And then we see the majority of this plant is all these old pseudobulbs that have lost all their leaves already. So we really need to revive this up so that we get more new growth happening. And that's all going to come from the rhizome itself, where those basal buds are just going to be waiting to send up new shoots. So let's open this pot up. So first of all, we want to release these new roots that have attached themselves to the pot so that we can damage them as little bit as possible. And the way we're going to do it is just by using our thumb, putting it over the top and just rolling over. We can see it's releasing slowly. So it's just a matter of gently going around and releasing those roots. You can be a little bit more violent with these ones because they are such vigorous growers. They won't mind actually just having these roots torn off them because they've got all this new growth happening already. But we'll just try and get off as much as possible without damaging it too far. And now we're just going to have to give this a couple of good thuds around the side. Try and loosen it up off the inside of the pot. Okay, that's not really working too much. I'm going to have to cut off most of those roots. They're breaking and I don't want to put too many broken roots into the new potting media. So let's see if we can get this removed. Let's see how hard and fast it's holding on. Okay, not too bad. There we go. And we can see what happened to the media here. It's basically just turned into compost. So my garden plants are going to love that, but the orchid not so much. So now what we're going to do is where these fern bases are, we're going to see if we can peel them away, because we can see all of this root growth that's happened in and around the outside has actually smothered a lot of the orchid roots themselves. So let's just see if we can pull that aside to help open it out. Don't want to make too much mess. And we notice how little orchid root volume there actually is. All we do have is this new root volume. All the old roots look like they've completely decomposed. So it's just merely a matter of getting in and pulling out all that old material, all those roots from the ferns, and then we can cut away the old dead orchid roots. And if there's any old dead orchid material in underneath, we can remove that too. Some people like to grow ferns in with their orchids. They say it helps them maintain the water. As soon as the fern starts looking dehydrated, they water the orchid. But I generally find the fern roots land up overtaking the pot itself, and then that starts causing problems in itself by stopping moisture from leaving the media, as well as not allowing that aeration that the orchids need. Looks like the plant itself is starting to break up into pieces, where these old pseudobulbs have actually just rotted and disintegrated from each other as it grew apart. Here we go. We can see how deep this was inserted into the media or filled up over afterwards, and I'll have to take a closer look in to see whether these lateral buds are still viable. They look a bit blackened, so they're possibly dead. And if they are dead, then what I can do is just remove those old pseudobulbs, because then they're not really going to be doing anything for the plant itself either. You can see how rotten these roots are. They're just peeling off. This is water soaked, and it's the middle of a dry winter. This orchid that I'm dealing with here at the moment is Leliantha Candeleo. This is a primary hybrid from Laelia undulata and Scoriantha baueringiana. And the reason you call it a primary hybrid is because both of those two are species. Oopsie. Now we know why this little guy was not looking all that awfully happy. He's just a tiny little piece that was put on the side where all the back bulbs are rotting off already, and the fern really made a real mess of it. And with this being a primary hybrid between the two, it's got really high light requirements. I find for my ones, they like to get at least some full sun during the day. They don't seem to like to take full sun all day. I tend to land up with burn marks on them, like I had seen on here. There we go. I get those sort of burn marks if they get too much sun during the day, but a good couple of hours of morning sun or the very late afternoon sun, generally they seem to love that. They're extremely vigorous growers, so they'll fill up a large pot like that relatively quickly. Okay, just back to this. We'll just cut off the end here to check if everything's, there we go. I'll just get in there, trim that out. One of the reasons that I'm just cutting out through the back there is just to check that there's no infection happening inside. This looks 100%, so I don't have to worry about there being any rots or fusarium or anything like that in the media or the back bulbs. It's always good just to make a cut in so you can just be sure while you're dealing with your orchid, so you don't have to worry too much later. That was just broken off, so I just snapped it off to just get it out of the way. It's not going to do anything for the plant any longer with such a small piece that was still attached, so just better to remove it. And as I was saying, this is Leliantha tandaleo. The flowers tend to have the coloration of the Goriantha baringiana, the standard color, and they have more of the shape of the Laelia undulata. So you'll end up with these long spikes with the flowers on top, between 10 and 15 flowers in that beautiful sort of almost pinkishy purple color. And they've got all those fine, thin, almost curled, twisted petals and sepals. They really are quite prolific flowers and so easy. They're fairly low maintenance and they can withstand a fairly broad range of temperatures, but generally in the warm to intermediate category. And we have some friends with us too. They do tend to eat dead rotting matter, but they can also happen to eat live roots too if they have the taste for them. So try and keep those centipedes away from your plants if you can. It's almost like meditational therapy for me, sitting here working with my plants. Gets you away from the wild world and allows you to concentrate on one thing at a time. Sometimes with orchids like this, you don't have to be so meticulous in getting out through between all the roots because they're often just going to overgrow it so quickly. But especially when you've got things like ferns that have been growing, you've got to make sure you get out any of those excess roots that may then reshoot those ferns again. Also, it just helps maintain the air movement and also removes any excess dead plant material that may allow for infection or fungus to set in somewhere. There we go. We have a dead pseudobulb here in the center, which means the rhizome probably there is dead too, but I'm not going to be dividing this. All I'm going to be doing is cutting out that dead part of the pseudobulb. We see there is a bit of green, so that rhizome's still okay. And when we're planting this, we're going to be trying to make sure we keep the whole rhizome at surface level. This way, any of those dormant buds around the base can then start to shoot, and we can have a big bushy plant again. Oopsie, don't do that. If you're looking at those dormant buds, don't go use your finger to press down on them, because that's going to happen, you break it off. But the nice thing about them is generally there's multiple spots that can form buds and continue the growth. Okay, there's our orchid. All of these roots that we damaged During that removal process, we're just going to trim off and allow all that new root set to set in properly. And there we have all our pieces. The small little one I'll probably pot up separately in a different pot, but all of these are going back into the same, or not the same pot, but into another big pot. We want to keep a nice big mother plant, a display plant, and those are going to be it. So now what we're going to pot it into, well, being part of that Laelia group, they actually like a lot of water during their growing period, but they like to dry out almost immediately afterwards. And they go through a dryish spell in winter, so they need a media that's going to drain exceptionally well. So one of the things we're going to do in this big pot, I'm not going to fill it with stone because that's going to make it too heavy. It is going to get relatively tall, but still it's not going to be tall enough that it's going to make the pot unstable. So I can actually use a fairly light mix. And what we're going to be using is offcuts of hardwood. This is our hardwood that we used for our decking timber, and we're going to be using offcuts of that. And we got a new garage door, so we're going to be using the polystyrene from the garage door, and we're going to be filling this pot at least halfway up with this mix. So what we're going to be doing is breaking the polystyrene up into uneven chunks. So we want all those uneven edges so that it helps keep those air gaps in between them. You don't have to worry about the bigger pieces, you can just pop them in, it's not going to make any difference. So always remember with polystyrene, please only use your old polystyrene that you're going to dispose of anyway. It's better going to a use like this than going into the tip. And we don't want to have to buy new polystyrene. There's lots of other media that you can use as opposed to it. So rather only use this if you're trying to get rid of it. So there we go, our polystyrene all broken up. And what we're going to do is just take these odd wood chunks. This is a hardwood. We want something that's not going to decompose too quickly. So if you've got something like a cedar or something like that, that would be ideal as well, but we don't have it, so these are just offcuts from our decking planks. And just mix them in with the polystyrene just to make an uneven blend, or should I say an even blend, with all these irregular shapes inside that are going to help cause the water to drain incredibly quickly. Also, it's not going to hold moisture. There we go. We can see all those big air gaps, and you know, as you pour water in, it's just going to pour straight out the bottom. So as I said, this is not really going to hold water. It will hold a little bit of moisture and allow for humidity. So the roots that set into the big bark chunks that we're going to be using to fill the balance of it can set through and into this media and allow for breathing. These roots really do need to breathe well, otherwise they are going to rot. So we're going to use some big bark chunks and some charcoal to fill it up the balance of the way. So our mix is basically going to be looking like that. I've overfilled the pot slightly now, so I'm going to have to remove some, set my orchids, and then set them back into place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this piece in two because I have a rather large dead space in between them. So what we're just going to go see where one of the links of the rhizome and the pseudobulb is and cut through. That gives me a piece that doesn't have terribly much interest to it at the moment, but be sure there's enough dormant buds on this to start producing more new growth. So it just allows us to set it in better and make sure we get a more even growth spread around the pot. Here again we have a long extended piece. We can see these ones are running at a different angle to the rest of them, so what we could always do is to help fit it into the pot better, remove those very two last back ones. This again we can propagate from and produce more growths. This we can use into our large pot. So we're going to set everything together as close to the center of the pot as possible to allow for a little bit of growth laterally outwards towards the edge again. Just carefully balancing everything together and then go in backfilling. We're probably going to need some stakes to hold these up, just to allow them to stand straight up until their new root set has developed properly. Again, we're not compacting the media. All we're doing is making sure that the plant itself is set upright and making sure that we get the bark in between the roots. We don't want to leave large pockets of air directly around the roots, as those will just desiccate them too quickly. So it's a fine balance between holding moisture and allowing drainage. And there we go. We'll just use one or two stakes to just hold it up. So I'll bring you in here to show you how shallow I have planted it to allow for those lateral buds to be exposed to the air so they can now start to pop up. There we go. We can still see all those rhizomes there. At the surface, not being covered up by the media all the way to where it was, which is about there. So that's going to allow for those dormant buds to now start popping up. By the end of spring, this should be back to its former glory. And Edward has been working like a busy bee to get all that reference material together for you in that Buy Me a Coffee link. So feel free to go have a visit down there. And thank you for watching. If you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.